has a fully costed, fair, and forward-looking plan. A plan that will go right at the heart of the affordability crisis that everyone in this province is facing. Just the other day, the morning of the Leaders' Debate, I signed the 19-point Ontario Liberal Affordability Pledge. 19 specific ideas that, taken together, will make life so much easier and more affordable for families in this community and beyond. Families that will be able to save up to $50 each and every day, $1,000 a month, because of the forward-looking plan, that affordability pledge. Ideas, for example, like bringing back rent control, delivering buck a ride province-wide, $1 transit fares on municipal transit services here in Mississauga, provincial transit systems like the GO train service that we have. You think about the fact that every single time you purchase any prepared food in this province that's under $20, which I do regularly, you stop at a local bakery or grocery store or restaurant, anything under $20, Ontario Liberals will take 8% off every single purchase. You know this here in this community and beyond, thousands of vulnerable seniors. We're going to give them up to $1,000 back every year in an old age security pension top-up. Again, we're going to bring back rent control and make it easier for first-time home buyers to get into the market and to buy their first home. And earlier this morning, here in Mississauga Maltons, I announced that as part of our affordability pledge, 19 points, this is number 18 on the list that can be found at OntarioLiberal.ca. And Ontario Liberal government will, as of July 1st of this year, take 5.7 cents per litre off the gas tax and 5.3 cents per litre off the fuel tax. So again, in a moment where the cost of gas has more than doubled under the last 18 months of Doug Ford, we have a plan that will make so many different aspects of your lives, and the people of Ontario's lives, so much easier and so much more affordable. And to my way of thinking, over the past few days, in particular since the Leaders' Debate, the choice has become so clear in this election campaign. And there is momentum that is gathering around these Ontario Liberal candidates because of our plan, because of our passion, because of our dedication to literally make sure that Ontario is once again a place to grow. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you everyone for coming. We will start off at the end over there, and please state your name, your outlet. We will do one question and one follow-up.
This is Badr Moni Chaudhary from Canada TV and weekly Pakistan. Steven, you are getting some more numbers of polls today. Do you believe on polls, and are you satisfied with its procedure?
Well, some of you have heard me say this before. Look, I was raised by my parents and grandparents. They taught me a couple of really important lessons, but one in particular. In life, it's just about hard work. It's just about showing up, being dedicated, never taking anything for granted. And so I know a lot, it's an election campaign. I know lots of polls get published. I think today is the first day of advanced polls opening up province-wide. Obviously, the ultimate voting day is on June 2nd. It really is the only poll that matters, the one that's happening on June 2nd. So I'll just keep working as hard as I possibly can. Ontario Liberal candidates like the four who are here today, I know how hard they're working. That's all we're going to do, because we are striving to earn the trust and support of people in this province. So starting June 3rd, we can do the other hard work that's required, the real heavy lifting that's required to make sure that Ontario is moving in the right direction. Thank you.
My name is Arshad Bhatti from Radio Pakistan, Toronto and Toronto 360 TV.
Hi there.
It's a very good platform. We see buck a ride and wages increase. But these things need money. So do you think it's possible? Normally, what our parties do, they do election promises, and the last year of the tenure, they start doing these. So will you be starting, if you're in the government, starting on the first day these things? How is it possible? Because numbers, the books are still in the negative.
Well, so first of all, what I'm really proud about with respect to our plan, and by the way, the platform is called A Place to Grow, and it's called that on purpose. What I'm really proud about is the fact that it is actually a very responsible and competent and thoughtful document. It's also very caring and compassionate, and in particular, it highlights the needs that we have in critical areas like confronting the affordability crisis, like public health care, public education, revolutionizing seniors care, ending for-profit long-term care, for example, and doing so much more. But the other part of it is, they're not just empty words. I can see that some of you have the document or or the shorter version of the document on your tables. The part that's really exciting, the part that helps me say to all of you that you're able to hold me and us accountable for what we're committing to, is that it's fully costed. So the book that you have doesn't have the costing in it, but you can find that at OntarioLiberal.ca in the longer form document. Every single commitment that we make, whether it's the affordability pledge, those 19 points, or it's the rest of our platform, every single thing is costed. And we're not making up the numbers the way that some of the other parties, particularly at the NDP and the Conservatives, do. Every single thing that we've included in our costing is taken from the Financial Accountability Officer's estimates from several weeks ago. We use as a fiscal anchor what they talk about when it comes to the revenues that are anticipated over the next number of years in this province. Those numbers, by the way, were backed up by the Auditor General when she reviewed the province's books as well. So it is responsible, it is thoughtful, but here's the other really cool part. We've just been through 2 horrible years as a province. 4 years ago, we didn't know we were going to get hit with a pandemic. Nobody knew. But the really good part about our costing document, and by the way, we are going to start the work on day 1. So buck a ride province-wide within 100 days of taking office. $10 before and after school care within 100 days of taking office. So again, we're not waiting until the 4th year. We're going to start the work urgently on day 1. But let me just say, we've included in our costing significant contingency funds. So in the first year, it's about $3.5 billion. And each year, that fund grows up to about $4.5 billion in the 4th year. And the reason we built in those contingencies is to make sure if there's an unforeseen challenge over the next 4 years, we actually have enough money in the bank, so to speak, our bank, our province's bank, to withstand any other future challenges. Again, it's very responsible, very thoughtful, very competent. And you can count on us to deliver on it because it's all right there in black and white.
All right, my follow-up is that it's all for the Ontario, all the platforms. But in Mississauga especially, the affordability for the housing is a very bigger problem. So is any specifically you're doing something for the Mississauga?
Well, so first of all, I'm a fellow 905er. So like the families who live in Mississauga and Brampton, I live in Vaughan. I'm a neighbor just a little bit to the east. So a lot of the affordability challenges that are being faced by families right here are faced by my neighbors and by the friends and the people that I live near as well, and frankly by family members as well. So when we talk about housing affordability and our commitment to build 1.5 million new homes over 10 years, that will mean thousands of new homes right here in Mississauga. When we talk about bringing back real rent control, because we know that rent has spiraled out of control under 4 years. Don't forget, by the way, 4 years ago, Doug Ford said if he was elected premier, he would keep rent control in place. Then he won the election, and then he got rid of rent control. He wanted to favor the speculators rather than focusing on the tenants. We're going to bring back rent control. I've heard from Mayor Bonnie Crombie and the other large city mayors, the big city mayors across this province, about how many units of housing right here in Mississauga already have approvals from the municipality and building permits in many cases, thousands of units. I believe Mayor Crombie said in Mississauga alone, it's about 60,000 units of housing that have approvals and permits in place, but speculators are waiting because they want to make more money. In the midst of this crisis, a crisis that's impacting everybody, particularly first-time homebuyers, young women and men, we need those units of housing built. That's why our plan includes what we call a use it or lose it levy. So if you're a speculator and you're sitting on the land because you want to make more profit later on, you will pay an annual charge, significant annual charge. Hopefully that will encourage more of those speculators to actually start building the units of housing that they have approved right here in Mississauga and beyond. These are just some of the examples that will help directly on the housing affordability crisis in Mississauga, but also across Ontario. Thank you.
Hi
Hi there.
Ray Chen from Sympathy.
Nice to see you.
A lot of our reader is actually concerned about every party is talking about spending, but we are in deficit and we have a huge debt. How can we lowering our debt?
So the other thing that I'm really proud of again within our plan, we've laid out 4 years of costing. So you can see exactly that the deficit that we would project to have in the first year would be identical to the deficit that Ontario Budget 2022 reported, so 19 billion in the first year. It would then shrink over the course of 4 years. And we anticipate in our plan, and again, this is all there for you to see in black and white, we anticipate that in the last budget before the 2026 election, so for fiscal year 26-27, that Ontario will be back at a balanced budget. under our plan. Now, I've said that many, many times in the course of the campaign so far, but I just want to stress two other things. One, we have included significant contingency funds in each of our years, just in case there's, nobody wants any more crisis. Nobody wants any more disruption after what we've lived through, but just in case there's a problem that we don't see right now. We have built in significant contingency funds to absorb any changes in the plan. That's number one. Number two, though I am confident that we will be able to balance the books by 2026, 2027, that fiscal year, in the off chance that there is some kind of additional crisis, and I as Premier have to choose between publicly funded education or cutting, investing in public health care or cutting public health care, investing in workers and their families or cutting benefits that workers and their families need, as Premier, I will invest in our people and what they need first. As long as we are actually on a path towards responsible investments, I know I'm comfortable with that, and I think Ontarians are. Having said that, assuming that we don't have any other major crisis or challenge, and assuming that we are able to continue to invest in people the way that I'm motivated to, we do anticipate that we'll be back at balance by 26, 27, by that fiscal year.
Oh, follow-up. You have a lot of emergency fund. Is that those money, if there's nothing there's no crisis and peacefully, is that those money will be put to pay out the debt or?
The contingencies?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the way it works in Ontario, every single year that you have any funds that are left in the contingency fund that are not invested in the course of the year, they automatically get applied to the deficit. So in theory, if everything's great and we have solid economic growth and there are no future challenges, in theory, our path to balance could be quicker. It could be quicker. But given what we've experienced over the past 2 years and how difficult it's been, I think it's responsible and competent and thoughtful to say, we believe we can overachieve, but we would put it this way, always good to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And that's what we've done with our fiscal projections.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciela, followed by media. So 2022, we saw a lot of crime, started off with 5 killings in the first 3 days. So what is the Liberal plan on addressing crime, because it has been going up since last year?
Yeah. So one of the very first things that I announced, and let me just say, I know in Peel Region, right across the GTA, frankly, in many communities across Ontario, there's a lot of fear out there right now. People are gravely concerned. We hear about carjackings, we hear about all kinds of stuff happening, gun crime in particular. The stats have been very, very troubling through the first part of this year. That's why one of the very first things that I announced in Scarborough with our colleague Mitzi Hunter and the rest of our Scarborough candidates several weeks ago was that an Ontario Liberal government would move to ban handguns in the province of Ontario, that we would actually work with the federal government in order to move forward. And let me just say, this is the first time ever, at least to my recollection, that there is a federal government that wants to work with provinces and territories to actually move forward on things like banning handguns. So that's something that is a priority for us as one of the key elements of how we can actually go right at that challenge that we're facing around community safety. We've also made a commitment to help support law enforcement and hire up more law enforcement support over the course of the next 4 years. But there's an important thing that I want to say about that. We want to make sure, working with all of our law enforcement partners, that the new police officers who are hired are truly reflective of Ontario, that they are from communities that have been underrepresented or have not had the chance to participate in law enforcement. We need our law enforcement services to look like Ontario, and to be truly reflective of Ontario's diversity. And so as we provide funding to help grow some of the police services with new police officers, we want to make sure those police officers are actually reflective of the communities they're serving. These are just 2 examples of how we'll tackle issues of community crime and community safety.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Stephen.
Hi there.
This is Hardeep Kaur from Parvasi Media Group.
Hi.
So as you have already mentioned about the house affordability, what's your plan, what's your party plan, right? So again, my question is, what will you and party will do to make Ontarians' life more affordable? You all parties like NDP, even the Conservative also, they promise that they are going to do something in the next 4 years. So what's your plan? If you have been elected as a premier, what will be your take on this one?
So I'm so happy that you asked that. I have to say, just the other day, it was this past Monday, so the morning of the leaders' debate, I was in the city of Toronto with about 20 of our candidates, and I signed something that we call the Ontario Liberal Affordability Pledge. There are 19 specific ideas, fully costed ideas. So we're not making this up, 19 specific ideas taken from our platform that when you count them all together, could save an everyday family right here in Mississauga $50 every day, up to $1,000 every single month. Those 19 commitments, part of that pledge. I'm happy to highlight some of them because I'm really proud of the work that this team of candidates put into making sure that this affordability pledge will actually work for the families that they're working so hard to represent. So, in no particular order, book a ride province-wide. If you happen to get on the GO train on a regular basis at a station, let's say Cooksville GO, I remember Cooksville GO because I was there with Deepika years ago to announce and do the groundbreaking on the new station that's there now. If you take this GO train regularly from Cooksville GO and you head into Union Station on a regular basis, book a ride province-wide is going to save you, well, I'm going to say about $350 every month. Every single month. $10 a day before and after school care. Right now in Mississauga, the average cost of before and after school care for families is about $25 a day. We take that down to $10 a day and you factor in what the length of the average school year is. Most families here who access that service right now would save $2,300 on average per year under our plan. I talk about the seniors, people like my mom and dad who are getting a bit older. Many are vulnerable. So in our plan, we're going to take the existing old age security pension top up and we're going to double it. We're going to knock it up to $1,000 a year potentially and then expand the eligibility so more of those seniors can actually access that particular top up. And again, just this morning, I stood with Ammon just around the corner and we announced that come July 1st as part of our affordability pledge, an Ontario Liberal government will take 5.7 cents a litre off the gas tax and 5.3 cents per litre off the fuel tax, because we know that in the past 18 months alone under Doug Ford, the cost of gas has doubled. And he promised 4 years ago that he would actually take 10 cents a litre off the price of gas. And he said, if you don't elect me, this is what he said 4 years ago, if you don't elect me, the price of gas will hit $2 a litre. Well, guess what? Ontarians elected him, and the price of gas hit $2 a litre. And he waited until right before an election campaign to say that if he gets reelected, he'll think about doing something after for the people of Ontario, or he'll do something after for the people of Ontario. That's not good enough. That's why if Ontario Liberals are elected come June 2nd, by July 1st, 1 month into our term, we'll actually deliver on cheaper gas at the pumps. 100 days after taking office, we'll deliver buck a ride province-wide. 100 days after taking office, we'll make before and after school care so much cheaper. Shortly after taking office, we'll take the provincial HST off every single prepared food under $20. That's 8% every single time you go into a bakery or a grocery store or get something from a coffee truck, whatever it is. As long as it's under $20, Ontario Liberals will help you save 8% every single time. These are just some of the examples in our affordability pledge. 19 points, fully costed. You can find it at ontarioliberal.ca.
Hi, this is Shilpesh from Gujarat Abroad newspaper. My simple question is, inflation is on the top, like from last 31 years is the highest right now. You promise about minimum wage raises.
Yes.
If you'd like to discuss about that and give your planning, like how that will help to live a happy life.
Sure, on minimum wage specifically?
Yeah.
So our commitment around economic dignity, which is what we call this entire area of our platform. So first of all, we'll move the minimum wage up to $16 an hour. But I think it's fair to say if you look around Mississauga or Brampton or Toronto or my home community of Woodbridge, I think somebody earning $16 an hour full-time, or frankly any work, it's really not enough to live on. So I know that we often talk about a minimum wage, but my perspective, our perspective is we're never going to deliver on maximum economic dignity and opportunity if we're always talking about minimums. You know, if we're always pushing workers in some sort of ridiculous race to the bottom, we need to actually give people who show up, who do their part, who work hard, like so many families do across Ontario, we need to make sure that whatever they're earning is something that they can truly support themselves and their families with. There's an old saying, an honest day's work deserves an honest and fair day's pay. And $16 an hour in some parts of this province just won't cut it. So though we're going to move the minimum wage to $16 an hour, we're then going to work with our partners, whether it's in the municipal sector, the private sector, not-for-profit, academics, to develop Ontario's first ever regionally adjusted living wage. So that in those communities where the cost of living is much higher, perhaps the minimum wage, if I can call it that, or the living wage, will be set a little bit higher. So people who are showing up and doing what they do, working hard, can actually live in the community that they're living in and be able to thrive. So minimum wage will move to $16 an hour, but then we're gonna build in a living wage. We're gonna bring back paid sick leave, which we know Doug Ford got rid of in 2018. And then, by the way, he took over 400 days, while thousands, hundreds of thousands of essential workers right here in Mississauga and Brampton still had to go to work at the massive distribution centers, even though they were sick, even though they were at risk, they still had to go. And that's because Doug Ford deliberately and callously chose to wait 400 plus days to deliver paid sick leave. Ontario Liberals will do it the other way. We'll have 10 paid sick days for workers right across this province. The other thing we're gonna do as part of economic dignity is make sure that every single worker has access to workplace benefits. And we're gonna make the workplace benefits portable. So they don't attach to the work scenario you're in or where you're working, they attach to you as the worker. So if over the course of a 30 or 40-year career, you happen to work for 10 different companies or businesses or entities, regardless of how much change you have in your career, the benefits will stay with you. And the benefits I'm talking about, prescription medication, dental care, mental health care, parental leave, a reasonable pathway to retirement dignity. All of that's gonna be included in our portable benefits plan. So tied into paid sick leave, the living wage, portable benefits, we believe Ontario workers and their families will get the support that they need.
This is Nitin Chopra from Prime Asia TV. One of the Liberal candidates from Brampton East, she supported Highway 413. So what is your take on that? And also, why don't Ontarians can get both the schools investment and the highways? Why that issue has been politicized so much? Because Ontarians need development, irrespective of any political party. They need schools, they need highways. So why this issue has been politicized?
Well, so first of all, it's not being politicized because elections are about choices. And the four people running to be premier, me included, each one of us in each of our parties has certain values and then priorities that are based on those values. So let me just say, because you mentioned our candidate in Brampton East, look, my commitment on Highway 413 has been ironclad. Like some others, I didn't just show up last week and start talking about it or last year. When I was transportation minister in this province for 3.5 years, all the way back in 2016 and 2017, when nobody else was talking about it, I was the first person to stop Highway 413 the first time. I appointed the independent panel that did the review of that highway. That panel report came back and told us that if after more than a decade that highway got built, it would be a small handful of commuters, a small handful that would save approximately 30 seconds a day on their commute. $10+ billion, more than a decade, thousands of acres of farmland, wetlands, and the greenbelt being lost forever so that a small handful of commuters could save just a little bit of time. But some of Doug Ford's richest political donors would go from being really, really rich to really, really, really rich. To me, that's about a value, that's about a priority. So let me be clear about this. Page 51 of the Ontario Liberal platform spells out in black and white that if elected June 2nd, at our very first cabinet meeting, we will kill Highway 413 once and for all. And then we're gonna take the $10+ billion that Doug Ford wants to waste on that highway. It's your money and it's my money. And we're gonna make sure that we are building 200 new schools across this province and renovating and rebuilding 4,500 others. So that's $10 billion over and above what's already in the school's infrastructure budget. And what's that gonna mean? Think about what we learned about our public schools during COVID. It's gonna mean that windows in my daughter's classrooms, for example, and your kids' or grandkids' classrooms, province-wide, can actually open and close properly. It's gonna mean within 100 days of taking office that we start to build in new ventilation systems in our schools so that they have heating and ventilation and air conditioning that's modern. So our kids can actually breathe safely and drink the water safely as well, because a lot of plumbing in our public schools needs to be modernized too. I want our schools to be modern, state-of-the-art, and healthy learning spaces, because public education everywhere, not just in one part of Ontario, but all over Ontario, is a critical priority for me and for the Ontario Liberal team. So I will say, there are highways in this province that do need to be rehabilitated and need to be expanded. As transportation minister, I was proud, for example, to be the one that advanced the widening of Highway 401 through Mississauga, the construction that's been underway for the last little while, the extension of Highway 427, and other highways. Where and when it makes sense, especially to move goods, it makes sense. But the 413 makes no sense. It's not going to save you any time, and it's going to cost you billions of dollars that we need to invest in public education. Lastly, let me just say on the 413, our plan for Buck a Ride province-wide, okay, so slashing transit fares down to $1, that's good for people's affordability, and of course it's good for the environment, but we also anticipate that that move alone will take 400,000 cars off of Ontario's roads. And we're going to deliver it within 100 days of taking office. Do you know what I tell people about the 413? I'll be 49 in July. I'm turning 49 in July. If Doug Ford wins again and he wastes your money, $10+ billion, and tries to build that highway, do you know that I'll be eligible for my Canada pension plan before that thing is going to open up? So if you happen to live in Brampton or Mississauga or Milton or Vaughan, and you're looking for relief in your daily commute right now, Doug Ford's plan to wait until I'm in my 60s to be able to get that relief is completely irresponsible. Buck a Ride province-wide will help you in your commute right away. It'll help you affordably on your affordability crisis right away. And we will take those $10 billion and invest them in our schools where that belongs, in our estimation.
Follow-up is for the bail reforms. Liberal government in the federal, within NDP, we have all other provinces, different governments. Why bail reform is not an important issue for all of our politicians, because where we talk about affordability, we talk about inflation, we talk about all other things. So when a police officer is also a human, when he see a repeated offender again and again on the roads and catching same culprit again and again on same kind of crimes, carjackings we know,
Right.
every day, 3 or 4 every day, Maple Leaf Star car
Yes,
was jacked,
yeah.
right? So why don't our politicians talk about bail reform, tougher bail reforms? We talked this to the
Right.
Sylvia Jones also, we talked to everybody. But is there political will missing to bring the bail reform? You talked about the handguns too,
Yes.
which is the good step.
Yes.
But why don't a bail reform, a culprit should be behind the bars, not roaming on our roads where our kids, families, in today's Canada, they don't feel safe.
Right. Look, I think I'm glad you raised that point with me. Community safety and the fears that many Ontarians understandably have right now are things that we need to take seriously as leaders. That is why I'm the only person that I know of running for premier. Certainly Doug Ford doesn't want to do it on the ban on handguns. That's why that was so important for me to say that very early on in this campaign, so people again understood what the clear choice looks like. But I'd be happy to take the discussion around bail reform back. It's not something featured in our platform right now, but it is something that I'd be happy to take a look at, working with other levels of government and partners as well.
But adding to that, is that not a federal also, because federal.
And that's why I mentioned working with our other
Yeah,
partners to
because
see.
this
Yeah,
issue is across Canada, not
Right.
one province.
you're right, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie?
Just to
Oh,
continue
sorry,
on that.
okay.
Yeah, no, okay,
Okay, please
I
go ahead.
don't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
It's-
Okay. Either one, I'll take both. Go ahead.
I'm just following up on that question there.
Go ahead, Jamie.
Federal laws, but it's your JPs or the province's
Yeah.
JPs that are granting these bails to people that we have.
Right, and that's why I said we take a look at it. It's not something that's included specifically in our plan right now, but we do talk about, for example, restoring or reversing the cuts to legal aid. That's one example that we do include in our platform. Again, I've already talked about the ban on handguns, but I'd be happy to take this suggestion back and for us to take a look at it. And I suspect, should we win on June 2nd, whoever serves as our Attorney General here in the province of Ontario would be very keen to learn more about how we can work in this regard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
I'm Rajendra Gadi from South Asian Canada.
Hi there.
You're mentioning in your plan that you'll cut down on the backlog of surgeries.
Yes.
Whereas I find a lot of people are moving back home to get the surgeries done. And what is your specific plan?
Sure. Yeah.
If you can elaborate on
I
that.
can, yeah. So again, it's actually earlier when I was talking and I talked about how Doug Ford's health minister said that they would prioritize private hospitals. She said that I think it was late February of this year. And it was specifically in response to a question about the surgical and diagnostic backlog. So what do we know right now? I believe it's the Ontario Medical Association who has confirmed that we we have about 250,000 people waiting for critical surgeries. That's everything from cancer surgery to joint replacement surgery. And we have another 750,000 roughly who are on what's called the diagnostic backlog, people who are waiting for MRIs or CT scans or other tests. That's about 1 million. That's about 1 million Ontarians who are on the surgical or diagnostic backlog. So just think about that for a second. 1 million people. That's bigger than Mississauga. It's the same size as Ottawa, give or take. I mean, that's an enormous number. And in their last budget, the Ford Conservatives talked about $300 million to try to clear this. That's not good enough. That is not good enough. When you're waiting for prostate cancer surgery and it takes months and months and months and you're afraid for your life, that's not good enough. And prioritizing private care, starving and cutting public care to prioritize private care, which is the conservative way, that's not good enough either. So our plan, over 2 years, we will invest $1 billion, $1 billion over 2 years. We're going to take the existing public hospital, public healthcare capacity, the operating rooms, the MRIs, the CT scans. We're going to make sure there are enough staff, nurses, doctors, diagnostic technicians, all in those capacities where they work. We're going to make sure the operating rooms and the rest of the testing centers can actually operate weekends, weeknights, all the time, around the clock. We're gonna scrap what's called Bill 124, the legislation that Doug Ford rammed through the legislature, which totally disrespects nurses, for example. It's funny when politicians talk about hospital beds, long-term care beds. Do you notice that the Ford Conservatives never talk about the people who have to work in the hospitals? It's great to have 500 new beds. If you don't have enough nurses, the bed is meaningless. So our plan, we scrap Bill 124. Over 6 years, we'll bring on 100,000 new healthcare workers. We're going to make sure that for the first time ever, a government stops talking about internationally educated nurses and doctors who are stuck not being able to work in their professions here in Ontario. We're going to get them out of the bleachers, as I say, and down onto the field where we need them. So they are working in our hospitals. By the way, we have a candidate in Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill, Marjan Kasserlu. She was an internationally educated nurse. She's a registered nurse. She actually had to go through the process to get her credentials recognized. She has talked to me personally about how tough that process was and how incredible it was for her to finally get her designation, her credentials recognized, so she could be a nurse here in Ontario. The Registered Nurses Association of Ontario suggests that there are 15,000 nurses like Marjan who have been trained in other parts of the world but can't actually do their nursing in our province. When we have this kind of surgical and diagnostic backlog, that's unacceptable. So in our plan, we'll make sure that internationally educated healthcare workers in particular can get through that system, can navigate that system in an easier to access way. These are just some of the examples, but the bottom line is we're going to prioritize public healthcare, public hospitals, $1 billion over 2 years. Thank you.
Any other questions at the back? Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure, no problem.
The Ford government has promised more than 300 million to the Ukrainian people coming to Ontario. What would you promise to these people who are coming to Mississauga? More than 20,000 people for Ukrainian origin fleeing the war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so look, like we've done as a country and as a province in the past with women and men who are fleeing horrible, horrible circumstances in their native countries, whether we're talking about Syrian refugees, we're talking about Afghans, we're now talking about Ukrainians. We are a welcoming place. We are a welcoming province. It's part of what makes, I believe, Ontario and Canada special and unique. So an Ontario Liberal government would work with our federal partners to make sure that all of the settlement services that are required to help Ukrainians, in this case, integrate and achieve or access the kind of opportunity they deserve, we would make sure that the settlement opportunities with proper funding and resources were in place to help make that happen.
Today, these settlement agencies are not in a position to offer even temporary accommodation to these people coming. So it's a question of working with them and working with our municipal partners to make sure that we can help provide shelter, that we can help provide individuals, whether they're coming from Ukraine or other parts of the world, under those kinds of horrifying circumstances, to set them up for success and make sure that they can successfully settle here in this province. So do you have a specific plan for this?
Well, if I can just go back for a second, I don't think there's a provincial commitment of $300 million. I know there's a significant federal commitment, but regardless, the Ontario Liberal government, should we win on June 2nd, would be taking a look at this. Our plan does include some references to how we can help immigrant and refugee settlement in this province, including, by the way, appointing a standalone citizenship and immigration minister, which Doug Ford got rid of as a standalone capacity at the cabinet table. Thank you. Yes?
I know you answered it this morning, but the Supreme Court case came down on the mandated letters. It's going through. Can you just quickly respond to that?
So they've agreed to hear the case?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you for letting me know. And secondly, look, I think it's absolutely appalling in this day and age that this kind of discussion had to go all the way to Canada's Supreme Court. I mean, it really must make it should and must make Ontarians think, what is Doug Ford hiding? What is so scary in those mandate letters? Now, given how we've seen him perform over the past 4 years, I expect, as I said this morning, that there's probably tons of detail in those mandate letters that he and his campaign team are afraid of. They're afraid of the people of Ontario seeing that they likely, openly in those letters, talk about privatizing healthcare, privatizing education, and undercutting the fight against the climate crisis, and scaling back workers' advances. Those are the things that they did, but my goodness, they must be just absolutely petrified about what's in those letters, because they know in the middle of an election campaign, they don't want the people of Ontario to know the truth about them, the truth about him. And the truth is that he's not up to the job, and that he will always prioritize private over public instead of doing what the people of Ontario need. It is absolutely unconscionable that a case like this needs to go all the way to Canada's Supreme Court. Doug Ford should do the right thing. He should release the mandate letters. An Ontario Liberal government that I lead will release our mandate letters as soon as the ministers receive them, so everyone in this province can understand what is the mandate, what is the responsibility, and then you can hold us accountable for delivering for you.
And separate follow-up on climate. So, we phase out coal, on track to meet emissions reductions targets. Darlington and a number of other plants going offline need refurbishing, replacing it with natural gas. So we're now off track to meet the climate targets. Ford and several other premiers signed a memorandum of understanding to collaborate on small modular reactor usage. So just considering that climate really hasn't gotten a ton of play in this election, wondering if you could state your position on that MOU. Would you continue working with the other provinces, and kind of more generally speak about where you see nuclear fitting into Ontario's future, considering that our major plants are not going to be operating.
And Pickering's going offline in 2025 in a couple of years. So I'll take, I guess, a step back and talk about it in a sort of higher level, and then I'll come back to the specific issue that you've raised. I think what's deeply disturbing for me is that even though this government, the Ford government, has known, like we've all known, that the Pickering nuclear facility is coming offline in 2 years, they have not effectively made any moves or led in any way, shape, or form to make sure that we can produce the kind of electricity that we need for our current needs, let alone what we need going forward if, according to our plan and most plans, we need to electrify our province even more. And I actually believe that there's a specific deliberate reason that they've had no plan around renewables. They canceled 750 renewable energy projects in this province when they came to power. The fact that they canceled conservation programs in this province to make it easier for people to actually use less electricity. I'm convinced they did all of that because they actually want to let the use of natural gas to produce electricity actually skyrocket in this province. I forget the exact number, but I think it's about, because of the way that they have not shown leadership in this regard, the Ford Conservatives, I think right now when Pickering comes offline, we're talking about a 400% to 500% increase in fossil fuel burning electricity generation in this province. That is horrible. When I think about how much Ontarians, under an Ontario Liberal government, how hard we worked to actually get off coal, and still to this day the single largest greenhouse gas emission reduction effort, I believe, in North America, moving away from coal to produce our electricity. The fact that we were so close to having a clean, green, sustainable energy generation or electricity generation system, that these guys, the Ford Conservatives, want to drag us backwards to where we were, again, it's completely unacceptable. It's irresponsible, it's reckless. In our plan, we believe that there is a way, using conservation first, using renewable, at-market renewable energy, new technology like battery storage, and yes, continuing to rely on nuclear, which makes up the lion's share of Ontario's baseload, including new technology like SMRs. And by the way, talking to our neighbors, Quebec and others, about the possibility of building in more support and purchasing some of their clean, in Quebec's case, hydroelectric power. It has to be the full comprehensive plan. But there's just, and by the way, part of our plan is to also phase out or end natural gas energy production or electricity production. But there's just no way that it should have come to this. This is something that needs to be on the agenda of the very first cabinet meeting, along with canceling Highway 413, because Pickering is in 2 years, coming offline in 2 years. It's not in 10 years, it's in 2 years. And Doug Ford's team has completely dropped the ball on this.
Thank you, that's all that we have time
Can
for
I just
today.
get one more in? I was waiting for all the local media. Debates.
Yes.
You
and me right now?
Yeah, sure. No, what I was thinking about debates, you participated in a couple of debates already. Your thoughts on debates and your thoughts on the local level, and the Conservatives aren't participating in debates on the local level, so if you can kind of hit all three subjects.
Yeah, look, for sure. First of all, the debate we had this past Monday night, I mean, it was such an honor for me to be there on behalf of our party. And on behalf of Ontarians who are looking for real progress, to be able to speak directly to the people of Ontario, to share what's in my head, what's in my heart about why I want the job of leading this province on June 2nd, that was an incredible honor. And again, I just want to say, like I said earlier, I really do believe it became clear on that stage there are two options here. Dragged backwards, held down, held back by the Ford Conservatives, versus an Ontario Liberal team and plan that is gathering momentum with the final 2 weeks of the campaign to make sure we can deliver for people. In terms of what's happening locally, and I'm sure my candidate colleagues here today are probably experiencing, I'm hearing about it from candidates in a lot of ridings, the Conservatives are just not showing up. And I think, not unlike the discussion I just had a moment ago around mandate letters, I think it really goes to the issue of like, what's motivating them hiding? What's motivating them hiding mandate letters for ministers for 4 full years and taking it all the way to the Supreme Court? What's motivating their local candidates, by the way, including sitting MPPs and cabinet ministers who just refuse to show up? I think one of the Conservative Hamilton candidates, I think confirmed today or yesterday, that it's not just a random decision being made locally, that they're actually being told by campaign headquarters not to go to debates. What are they afraid of? What's in their, I guess, secret or hidden agenda that's going to destabilize Ontario that they don't want to share? I think Doug Ford thinks he can sleepwalk his way back into the Premier's office. That's not good enough in the Ontario that I'm fighting for. That's not good enough in the Ontario that I want to lead. Especially after 4 years of serving as Premier. In his case, the fact that he can't even look into a camera without reading the notes that somebody else wrote for him, I think speaks volumes about his capacity or lack thereof to lead this province. Ontario Liberal candidates are showing up everywhere. This team is knocking on doors. They're showing up to the debates. I was happy to be there, privileged, in fact, honored to be there this past Monday night. We got nothing to hide. Our plan is open, it's transparent, and it's fully costed. I think especially in this day and age, that level of transparency and accountability is what the people of Ontario deserve. Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.